Downtown Sarasota Condo Association. As I mentioned to you, we are recording this, and I have asked you, those of you who are not on the board of directors and are not presenters, to please shut your video off so that I can see those that I need to see on the first page. As you know, Zoom gives us multiple pages with multiple names, and it's a little bit difficult to keep track of everyone. So having said that, I think we'll do a roll call. Roger Barry. I know I saw you, Roger. I believe you're on.
He's waving.
Two. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I was muted.
Thank you. Peter Fanning.
Here.
I see you. Alan Friedman.
Here.
Patrick Gannon. I see you. Clark Lauren. I see you. David Lowe. I see you. John Moran. I did see you a minute ago.
There he is.
Okay. Bob Parola. I see you. Ken Sheelan and Jamie Still. So everyone is here. Thank you very much. We'll go directly to Jamie Still, who will give the secretary's report.
Did we receive the minutes for February 3rd?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any edits, questions?
Any changes to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Who said that? Oh,
Alan.
thank you, Alan.
Who was the second? Alan?
Alan.
Okay,
Alan.
thank you.
This is for the next minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Perfect, thank you. The treasurer's report, Clark.
In our stable pond checking account, we have an available balance of $18,310.34.
Thank you. Sounds like we can have a party.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If that's all of it. We'll go directly now to new business, as we always do, because if we have guests, as we do today, we like to get them in and out so they don't have to hang around, though they're welcome to. Our guests today are Evan Golden, CEO of Park Aid, and Chris Sharrock, I hope I'm pronouncing your names correctly, President of Sharrock Solutions. Both of these have to do with electric vehicle charging, and hopefully they will be giving us some of the most up-to-date information about how that can be done in a multifamily residence. So I'm going to turn this over to Patrick, I think. Patrick, you are the person who organized this, and you're the most knowledgeable.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have known Chris Sharrock for many years. We worked together with the Suncoast Electric Vehicle Cooperative when I first had my Prius, and Chris was running around with, thinking, a Volt at the time, and now we're both Tesla owners, and so we've gone full circle. So kick the gas. So Chris is very, very knowledgeable, and he brought to our attention Park Aid as a potential solution for multi-unit dwelling buildings, condos, where you have, in some cases, limited parking spaces, capabilities, et cetera. So that's the facet that Evan will be talking about from Park Aid. Chris has a much broader background and will be hopefully engaging maybe with our electric vehicle charging subcommittee under Alan Friedman, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the agenda, issues and how we're going to take away information from here. So let me go ahead and just introduce Evan, and also Chris, if you want to say anything at the beginning, and then you two can take it forward.
I think Evan's got a prepared slideshow and everything he's going to go through, so I'm going to let him do that first. And
Do you want me to display it, Evan, or are you just going to talk to it?
And you're muted, Evan.
Yep, that'd be great if you could enable screen sharing.
Okay.
Or make me the host or whatever.
It's enabled for multiple, so
Perfect.
You see.
Great. Well, really appreciate you guys having me. Chris and I don't know each other, so we didn't coordinate this. We may have different perspectives on it. And I'm interested in. I'm probably going to stick around and listen to his what he's going to say, so that I can be more knowledgeable after this. But really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. I'm speaking to you from foggy California, but my coworker Beth, who's on the call, is actually in Orlando, so not too far away from you guys. But I am the CEO and founder of a company called Parkade. We help condominium buildings really manage their parking in a much better, smarter, more modern way. And I'll give you a quick overview of what we do. EV is a really important facet of it. Before I do that, I like to say what we don't do, because often when someone just hears parking app, they think we're going to turn your garage into a commercial lot. So I like to be very clear that that is not at all what we do. We are not a way for strangers to book parking in your building or anything like that. And I want to tell you the three problems that we're kind of trying to solve and that we have solved in a lot of the buildings that we're working with. So the three problems are, number one, that we see, and I'm sure you guys, probably anyone in a condo building in Sarasota has seen this, because you have a lot of second homeowners. A lot of your deeded parking spaces just sit empty for hours or days or even months at a time. And that, really makes parking a lot harder than it otherwise, kind of needs to be. Another problem that we solve is that we see visitor parking being really difficult for buildings to manage. Most buildings either find it so difficult or didn't put it in the kind of pro forma when the building was built that they even offer any at all. Or if they do, it's usually poorly managed. It's often 2-hour free, first come, first serve, hope for the best. You can't be reserved in advance, that kind of thing. And that's a problem that we've really helped alleviate. And then the third bucket is that EV charging has really made parking at condo buildings even more complex. And I'm sure you guys know that, especially if you're in an older building that is struggling to install even its first EV charger, or if it has some, but it's struggling to provide enough EV charging kind of capacity for everybody. That's a real problem in getting, more crucial by the year. And certainly I know a lot of buildings are getting to the point where it's impacting home values. Bless you, Roger. So the three things that the three ways we solve this are, number one, we help buildings kind of modernize how communal parking works and make it reservable in advance. It can be free, it can be paid, up to the building. We also enable people to, in the same place, make their deeded parking spaces available. So in the same place that you might reserve a guest parking space, you can actually reserve someone else's deeded parking space as well. And that's really interesting and unique. And we know that happens today to some degree, but we make it a heck of a lot easier. And then lastly, and I'll talk about this in depth, but we really expand your kind of options for delivering EV charger access to residents at your buildings. We do this through our mobile app. So we have this app that we've built called Parkade. And what we do is work with each condominium building to create a private group on our app where people can reserve parking spaces. So it's only available for residents and staff, not available for the public. But essentially you would download our app, you would get an invite link from the property manager, or maybe just an HOA board president or something like that. And you would be invited to use our app to park at a specific building. Once there, you can search for parking, you can offer a parking space, you can reserve guest parking if we've worked with the building to make that happen. And you can do it short-term, long-term, you can pay for parking, you can reserve spaces for free. Notifications are built in, which are really great because you get a reminder when it's time for you to vacate and that kind of stuff. And we see that some buildings, obviously don't have any guest parking whatsoever, but those that do, this makes it a lot easier for them to manage their guest parking. I've literally, my old building, the very first building that started in, was using pen and paper to manage guest parking, and security was having to chase people down or look through video footage to figure out when a guest left. And there was no way to reserve a spot in advance. And we've really made visitor parking just a lot easier for people to use and a lot more reliable. We've often saved a lot of staff time where today the staff is kind of managing that themselves. And then, so getting into the EV piece, we essentially make EV chargers work a lot better for everybody. And we do this in a couple ways. So one is when a spot is added to our system, we make it really easy for the person adding it to mark whether that spot has access to an EV charger. And this could be a communal spot. This could be a deeded parking space that you've paid a couple $1,000s to install a charger in. It doesn't matter. Either way, we make it easy to mark that it has a charger and know that if you're reserving spot 47, you'll have an EV charger available to you when you park there. And this is it's really become a perfect solution for condos, and then becoming the leading reason that condos are reaching out to us. And part of what we enable here, and I'm going to be particularly interested in Chris's perspective on this, but part of what we enable here is really a shift in how your building can do EV charging. So we see a lot of buildings where they're struggling to install EV chargers because they're looking at, $10,000, or in this case, this one I picked out is $40,000 for an EV charger. And these chargers can be really, really expensive when you go with the kind of fancy network solution, when you go with the ones that are going to charge precisely to the kilowatt hour and charge you $2.74 for your charge. And even when those expensive chargers are then installed, if they go in a communal parking space, often, you often can't reserve the parking spot in advance. So you have to just hope that there's going to be a charger available in that bank of chargers. Or if it goes in a deeded parking space, it's really only going to be available to that owner and that owner only. So the owner is going to spend, $6,000 to install an EV charger, and then they and their guests are really going to be the only ones that can reliably use it. We make it a lot easier for a building to really chart a different path and put in cheap chargers, put in a $300 to $500 Tesla charger or any other kind of generic charger, and then just charge for the parking. And you really, or make it free if the building wants to, but by charging for parking, you really solve kind of two problems at once. You're able to recoup the cost of the charger and the electricity and really minimize monopolization. So really a whole kind of new way to deliver EV, kind of universal EV access to your building, where today's approach might be, thinking you need to put an EV charger in every single parking space for everybody to have access. We can get EV chargers in, 20% of your building and then help everybody share those spots. We're not going to install the chargers, but we'll be the system people use to share their parking spaces. And there's a lot of great things that happen as a result of this. People like certainly knowing in advance that they'll be able to get a charge when they get home. And so moving from a system where it's first come, first serve, and they're just rolling the dice when they get back on whether there's going to be a charge available, to a system where they can reserve in advance, really brings a lot more predictability that's important for owning an EV, as I'm sure Patrick would probably attest to. And again, we can really dramatically lower the cost of installing these chargers. Additionally, just wanted to touch on our pricing. We don't cost anything whatsoever to the HOA. There's no setup fees. There's no ongoing fees. The only way we make money is when someone in the building charges money for a parking space and that spot gets rented. We add a small fee on top of that. So if the HOA wants to use us, and we're in dozens of condominium buildings across the country, if the HOA wants to use us, it's almost as easy as launching a Facebook group for the building. And we just make money when people exchange parking spaces. So we try to make that really a win-win for buildings. There's no, $1,000 fees or anything like that. And when it comes to getting us at your building, there's two ways to do it. A bunch of residents could just kind of band together and start using the app. You could set, the board president or anyone could send out a link and say, hey, let's try this new app to share parking spaces. It seems easy. Or we work with a lot of buildings where we go through the board, we get officially approved, and then we start working with your property management team to really get awareness out to everybody, to put up flyers, to send emails out, to ensure that new residents get the memo, that kind of stuff. So you can really go either of these routes. We love to work with property managers. It's definitely our most successful partnerships are really when the building is kind of fully bought in. But you can go either way, or you can even start it as kind of a test. But we're just a way for buildings to share parking in a much smarter way, and for buildings to bring a lot better EV access to everybody in the building. So I promised I'd keep it to my presentation at 10 minutes. I think I just came in under the wire. So with that, I would love to answer any questions that folks have about this, or how it works or anything like that.
Any questions? If let me ask from the board first.
Mhm.
Patrick, can we unshare so I can see?
Yeah, I was going to take that off there.
Yep. Yeah.
If you just, there we go.
Thank you very much. That was really, really interesting. From the board, are there any questions? Alan?
Yeah, Evan, I do have a question about monopolization. Our building, which incidentally is the Alanari, I don't know if you chose that name.
I knew you were going to ask the first question.
Yeah, so I get first question privileges. Monopoly, we're looking now at installing one or more EV charging stations. And one of the questions that has arisen is that of somebody who requires 2.5 or 3 hours to charge, sits there overnight or for 6 hours during the day. What, if anything, is built into your program for hustling those people out of the spot, so others have an opportunity to get in?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is, I mean, I think really key to hopefully I think the value that Parkade can bring, because I can't tell you how many buildings I talk to where they've installed, they've spent a lot of money, they've installed 10 EV chargers in a communal bank or something like that, and it's just turned into a Tesla parking lot. And people are just staying there for days on end, or at least hours on end, and they're not really sure how to solve that problem. So they come to us, and we offer a few different solutions for that. I mean, number one is charging for the parking. So if you make the spot free and only have people pay for electricity, it's going to turn into a Tesla parking lot, right? You have a big EV sign, they're going to treat it like EV parking. And so by adding a small fee to the parking, you can really reduce monopolization. And that helps increase turnover. It helps defray the costs of the chargers. And you could, like I said, you could even install cheap chargers instead of expensive chargers and just charge $5 an hour for the parking and electricity. And you'll really see a lot of turnover when that happens. So that's been one of the ways. We also make it easy for buildings to set maximum lengths, or to have like blocked out hours where every night we're gonna, it's not gonna be available from 1 to 2 a.m. or something like that, so that people turn over. We give them a bunch of different options around that and around turnover and maximums, and that really helps ensure that people are turning over, because the whole concept of our system is people know exactly when the spot's available. They book just for that portion, and then they take off and they make that spot and that charger available for somebody else.
From your experience, do you have any sense of what the penalty might be for somebody overstaying their welcome in their reserve time?
Yeah, we really see a sea change in behavior after we launch. So once people start using us, because it becomes so much easier to reserve a spot, but there's not really a reason to overstay your welcome. You can get a different parking space if you need to. And the other thing I'll say is, we have their credit card on file. So it's nice about us. We don't need to go through the board to issue a fine or anything like that. They have put their credit card in. We are able to issue late fines. We do that very, very rarely. In tens of thousands of reservations, I think we've issued 5 late fines. It's very, very rare that we have to do that, but it does happen. It's rare because knowing that you have kind of the threat of a small slap on the wrist is going to really improve people's behavior. So that helps a ton. We try to be flexible. We often honestly give, the first time it happens, we'll often just say, don't worry about it. But if you become a repeat offender, we'll issue fines. And then if it's a really repeat offender, you also, or your property manager, has the ability to remove their access completely. So they can just boot them and say, I'm sorry, you're misbehaving. We're going to remove you from the app. So that all of those different levels of penalties help a ton. And in our entire history, we've never once had to tow a car. Part of our value prop is, we make it really easy for someone to find an alternative place to park as well. So it's not as dire a situation if you come home and someone's still in your space. So for that, those among other reasons, we've never had to tow either.
Thank you.
Chris Sharrock, you had your hand up. Did you want to add?
I just wanted to chime in that Tesla is already doing this with what they call idle fees. If you're on the charger, and these are the Tesla ones that are nationwide, if you're on that charger and you're full and you're still sitting there, you're getting billed. It's that simple. And it sounds like Evan's got the program to implement something very similar. This is nationwide, Alan. This is not something that I do or that Evan does. This is something that I say nationwide, globally, now that they have supercharged stations across the globe.
Thank you. That sounds really like a good idea. Peter.
You reference cheap charges, expensive charges. Can you delineate and a range of what a cheap charger is and why it's cheap to an expensive charger and why it's expensive?
Yeah, and Chris is welcome to chime in here too, but I was going to say just the big difference is a networked charger, which is plugged into the internet and tracks exactly how much electricity you use. Those chargers are just inherently a lot more expensive because they do a lot more. And then there's non-network chargers or dumb chargers. those are a couple $100 and are not going to be able to, track or bill you precisely for the electricity you use. They're just, a big electric cord, and they're going to plug in your car. So those are the two different types. And as a result, the prices of network chargers are a couple of thousands of dollars at the low end, or maybe, the cheapest I've seen is like $1,500 up to $40,000 or $50,000, though the prices are falling. And then a dumb charger, a non-network charger, can be a couple $100, $200.
So it doesn't deal with speed of charge. So a cheap charger just has more internet capability or app capability. It doesn't charge faster than, an expensive charger doesn't charge the vehicle faster than a cheap charger.
I'll defer to Chris because I see his.
I'll take that one. Peter, there's 3 levels of charging. The level 1 charger is an outlet, 120 volt outlet. A level 2 charger is about what we're probably looking at, which is what you guys have downtown now. The level 2s will charge a car, a big Tesla, overnight, 8 hours. The level 3s are the direct current DC, super fast charge. They'll charge a car in an hour, 2 at the most. But those are the ones that you have on the highways. The level 2 charger is probably what we're looking at here. What most would recommend for a condo. And that again is like a dryer outlet. It's a 240. And the range, again, the capital cost, as Evan was pointing out, can be as cheap as $300. I would suggest you guys get something a little bit more commercial grade, like something that's at the airport. But the handles on them are much more rugged if they're going to be turned over a lot. Those are $1,000, $500 to $1,000 somewhere in there in capital. But the point Evan's making is that the bells and whistles that are on these expensive level 2 chargers that could be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, even $6,000 for these things. There's a modem in there. They have to talk to the internet. It's a completely different animal, all the bells and whistles. Let me add this. That's the capital cost. They have an annual fee for those. You got to pay to have that communication. You got to pay $200 or $300 a year per plug in order for that thing to talk to the internet, in order for that thing to go get the credit card information and come back down and all of that. So when Evan says dumb chargers, he means essentially a plug that goes into the car, and the charger's on the car. So the actual thing is just giving the electricity at a certain speed to the cars, and then the chargers are actually on the cars.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? David.
Yeah, just a question about capacity. I understand that the station may be $500 to $1,000, but what about older condos and whatever having enough wiring and so forth, and the reality of being able to incrementally increase their electricity use by, pick a number, 5–10%, and then they run out of juice, if you excuse the pun. But as a practical matter, is that a big deal?
I'm going to say no, and that'll be up to FPL to come out and take a look at everything. And David, the other thing I'll point out is that most of these cars can come on in the middle of the night and charge when the rates are lower, possibly, or when other things aren't running, right? We're not using anywhere near as much juice from midnight to 4 a.m. than we are when we all get home from work or cooking dinner or whatever. So it's going to be up to the electricity provider, who want to sell you electricity, by the way. So they will find a way in order to make those improvements, whatever would be necessary, even for the older communities and condos.
Thank you. If we don't have other questions from the board, I'm going to open it up to those who are here who are not on the board. If you want to turn on your video, I can see you, Irv. How about you? Why don't you start?
I just want to comment. I'm at Bay Plaza, and we've already installed a couple of charging stations in our on the rooftop of our garage. I don't know all the details, but our property manager would certainly be willing to share them with other condominiums. So if you are interested in what we did and what it cost and how it's working, send me an email.
Thank you, Irv. Janet, you had a question.
I'm sorry.
We're a small,
just-
I'm in Saraband, and we are a relatively smaller condominium. So I'm wondering if there is a break-even point on number of spaces and number of cars where the group system of parkade is more advisable or less advisable.
Yeah, so we work in any size building. Essentially, to maybe a better way to frame it is whether your building is 30 parking spaces or 300. What we help buildings do is ensure that you don't need to install 30 EV chargers in 30 parking spaces or 300 EV chargers in 300 parking spaces, that you can get by with a lot fewer chargers because we allow these chargers to be shared. So rather than Janet getting one and Evan getting one and Patrick getting one, and they all just sit, idle when we're out of town or when we're at work or anywhere, they can be shared among us. So maybe Patrick would get one, and then you and I can just, borrow his spot when he's not using it. And that allows your building, again, regardless of the size of the building, to just get by with a lot fewer chargers and to maybe put money back in HOA's pocket if they go in communal spots, or to put money back in, Patrick's pocket if he paid $6,000 to, get an EV charger installed. Does that answer your question? So it can really work in any size building.
Evan, before I go to another question, I have a question. How do you handle liability issues? So if I allow my parking space to be used by anyone and everyone, and the very nice brand new car in the space next to me has a big scratch on it when I come back, and how do we determine who's liable for that sort of damage or other possible issues unless you've got cameras on everything?
Yeah, it's not going to be much different than if your building has guest parking, or if you texted your friend and had them come over and park in your spot. Except that we do add some additional indemnification for the building when people use our service. So as part of signing up for Parkade, you're going to have to agree to the terms of service, which is going to indemnify any partner buildings that we work with. So that helps add a layer of liability protection that if you have guest parking today, or if you're loaning spots out among the community today and people are not agreeing to any kind of terms as part of doing that, that's going to be an additional layer of liability protection that you don't have. And at the end of the day, those nationwide in every single state, it's state mandate that you have liability insurance. So those should be kind of primary, and we will be indemnifying the building. We do indemnify the building if someone were to get into an accident and try to sue the building for some reason.
I'm not even talking about the building. I'm talking about the fact that if I decide that my parking space can be used by others, rented out to others, but the individual in the space next to mine has not signed anything and isn't interested in taking part in this, he's not indemnifying anyone. So he sues everyone in sight. How do we handle that?
Yeah, I mean, it would be no different than you loaning your spot out to a friend for the day, and the same thing happens. We're not changing any liability methodology in that. Like, that's not there's nothing different about the situation because you used an app to coordinate versus use text message to coordinate versus use email to coordinate. In any of these cases, it's not a different. There's nothing different about the liability except that you're adding.
I'm a little nervous about that. Kurt, you turned your video on. Did you have a question? You're on mute. Unmute yourself, please.
David asked the question, and I'm not sure that Chris really answered it about the costs. He talked to FPL. What are the upfront costs of installation to an older building?
Kurt, I have no idea what I'm an engineer by the day, just so everybody knows. I do pipe systems, pump systems, water systems, very similar to electric. I've got to know what the existing system is before I can make any upgrades. It depends on the size of your main coming in. It's then going to decide on whether or not you've got spaces within the existing panel for additional breakers. how many chargers you want to put in, how many breakers do you need. These are dual pole breakers. So they take up a little bit more room, and it depends on a lot of different factors, Kurt. Even the distance away from the panel to the parking space. Typically, you'll see electric vehicle charging up front near a building, and they're empty, and you're like, oh darn it, I had to park way back there. Well, it's because the power's up by the building. It reduces the costs in order to put the parking spaces closer to the panel. So if it's a parking spot, you've got to run a conduit and wire to that's further away. You got to have a bigger breaker. You got to have bigger wire. You got to have longer conduit. There's a lot of things that go into it, Kurt. And I don't know if I can just give you an answer.
Okay.
I was talking about the chargers themselves.
Fair enough. I guess the question is, to whom do I ask how to do this?
FPL has specific EV specialists on staff to help you evaluate what your current system is and what it needs to be in order to accommodate X number of chargers.
Okay, good enough.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions? I'm going to switch over to page 2 here. Oh, Patrick, go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up for some of the questions, especially those, I think we heard that Bay Plaza, whatever, had already installed EV chargers, et cetera. So when we get into Alan Friedman's discussion of our subcommittee, surveying, gathering information about what others have done so we can share that across the survey, that's one of the key reasons for this subcommittee. So we'll talk about that in a few moments.
Terrific. Further questions? I'm switching to page 2.
Elaine, can I ask
David
Evan a
Lyons?
question?
Yes, I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
So I'm at 1 Watergate, and we put in a couple of what you would call dumb chargers recently. And so far, we're not, they're definitely not overused, but it's a little bit like, build it and they will come. No one could get an electric car until we had the chargers here. But I'm wondering, Evan, a couple of just nitty-gritty questions, how it works when someone makes a reservation to use a charger. Are they putting in a specific amount of time?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, our whole system is all based around the idea that we know people tell us exactly when they're looking for parking. Maybe it's 4 hours, maybe it's 4 days, maybe it's 4 months. And our system kind of smartly matches them with whatever spots are available. And that might be a residence deeded spot, might be a guest parking spot, whatever we have available, we'll show them and they can book that. And then the other party is going to know, they'll know that as well. So they'll get told, okay, David, Evan is borrowing your spot from 7 p.m. to 9 in the morning tomorrow.
Okay, and then if, let's see, so the way you would know if someone had, I'll put it this way, overstayed their welcome would be by the subsequent person showing up?
Yeah, usually. And it's really rare that happens. It does happen. Honestly, the more common scenario is not that someone overstays their welcome, because remember, we have their credit card on file. The more common scenario is you live in New York and you've been gone for 3 months and your neighbor noticed that you haven't used your parking spot in 3 months and they've started abusing it and they've started parking there. And that's the more common scenario, that you put your parking spot on Parkade, I rent it, and I text you and I say, hey, just to let you know, I canceled, I found other spots, someone was already parked there. That's the more common scenario. And we see that time after time, especially in buildings in kind of vacation areas, because there's so many second homeowners and people take notice. So one of our big value adds is that there's a lot of benefits to not having your spot sit empty for 4 months when you're out of town. And one of them is that your neighbors start to take notice that it's not empty. And they think, okay, maybe I should not have my guest park there because I did see a Honda Civic there yesterday. That helps a lot and is one of the kind of best ways we've seen behavior change in launching us.
Great, thank you.
Alan?
One more question, Evan. Is this system customer to customer, or is there ever any need for some intermediary like the building manager or the concierge or the security people? Would there ever be a reason for them to be involved, or is it strictly customer to customer?
Yeah, good question. I actually think what's interesting about us is that we are, I'll call it resident to resident, but also resident to building. So this can be the place that you reserve your guest parking spaces that are maybe managed by your property management team, and maybe they are changing that and making, who knows, changing prices, changing dates that are available, what have you. And it's the place that you can reserve spots from residents. So it really ends up functioning as a place to get, any parking space in the building, whether it's someone who's back home, who's out of town for 2 months, or the building has some excess parking that they sell long-term, or guest parking, what have you. We even see the staff themselves actually becomes often one of the best beneficiaries of this, because staff is often left out of the equation of where to park. And so we see condo building after condo building where there's 3 guest parking spaces and 300 deeded parking spaces all leased out to residents, or deeded to residents, and nowhere for staff to park. And then if you look in the garage 9 to 5 on weekdays, it's half empty. And so we often see staff actually become one of the kind of main day-to-day people that love using the app, because they often don't have anywhere else to park that's close to the building. So it becomes a place for anyone that's a part of your community, staff or residents, to use.
Thank you. Roger.
Yes, I'm curious about service vehicles. Does that work for them as well?
What do you mean by service vehicles? You mean vendors?
I mean the electrician, the carpenter, whoever's there.
Yeah, great question. We really leave it up to each building. I mean, essentially the way it could work and the way it can work, and we've seen it work in a number of buildings, is that if you have a vendor coming to visit today, if I have a plumber and he has a vehicle that is of a reasonable size that will fit in my garage, I could reserve him a space and say, hey, I reserved you spot 47, text me when you're here, I'll let you into the garage. That's a very common scenario. We have seen buildings just set up some rules when they launch Parkade, saying, hey, you can use this for vendors, but it's only for non-commercial vehicles, or something like that. Or it's only for vehicles that are kind of normal size, right? No like giant glass panes or those kind of things. So it can be totally up to each building. But in short, it has been a good way to find parking spaces for vendors when they're driving vehicles that can actually fit in the garage.
Are there any security concerns about allowing vehicles into what would otherwise be closed garages? Does your program keep track of who is in what spots, so that if something happens, you know who it is?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so one of the, and if I can I'm just going to very quickly show this again. One of the great things we do is actually add a layer of security that I'm sure you guys don't have today with people sharing spaces over email, which is we ask who's actually going to park there. Is it you, or is it a guest of yours? And if it's a guest of yours, you're able to add them to the reservation, and we collect their name, their contact info, and their license plate. And then this information, if we do go the path of working with your property management team, is available to your property managers. So they'll actually have, again, unlike people just randomly parking in guest parking or borrowing spaces directly over email, they're going to have the ability to see all reservations in your building and be able to drill in, to be able to look and see whose spot is it, who's parking, and we'll have contact info for both parties if anything comes up. So it definitely adds a layer of security over however you might be, sharing parking spaces today, whether it's Facebook or Building Link or email or what have you. And the guests themselves and we'll have, I said, their contact information as well.
Terrific. Well, I don't see any other questions. Is it possible to unshare the screen so I can actually? Terrific. I don't see any other questions.
I have a question, Eileen.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Hey, Liz.
I'm in the Regency House, and I saw some, and Ted Wilson's on here, so maybe he knows some suggestion about putting in some charging stations and some pushback about, well, why should I pay for charging stations for somebody else? I don't have an electric car. So do individual owners purchase the charging stations, or does the condo association purchase it and then try to get the money back? How is it usually done?
Yeah, I'd love Chris's thoughts too. I mean, we are not an EV installer. I just work with a lot of buildings that do install EVs. So just speak to that. I've seen it go both ways. I've seen usually the way it works, and it's not always, and there's different configurations because sometimes your parking space is not deeded, it's assigned, and there's kind of, significant differences there. But the building can obviously put in any amenity it wants in communal spaces. So if they want to put it, we see a lot of buildings put EV chargers in their guest parking spaces as a way to handle that. And our system, again, would allow them to start recouping those costs by charging for those spots. Then we do see, I think, kind of the more common scenario I see is residents putting chargers in their deeded parking spaces. And I know that it might be different in Florida. In California, actually, as of 2021, the HOA is no longer allowed to say no to that request. So as an owner of a deeded parking space in my building here, and I have an EV on order for September, I am now allowed by law to put in an EV charger in my spot. The building can charge me for that, but they can't say no. So that's becoming more common. I don't know, I forget what the law is in Florida.
Yeah.
I don't think you have that, but we certainly see a lot of buildings where they work with a company to allow residents to install chargers in their deeded parking spaces. And often then they'll just go out and they might do it in batches to lower the cost. So they might say, okay, every 6 months, we're going to check and see who wants to do this. And when that happens, we're able to do it at a cost of $4,000 per charger rather than $7,000. There are other buildings where you can do it anytime and it's, $7,500 or something like that. So it runs the gamut.
Well, I think in our building, we don't have deeded parking spaces. It's just assigned. So I was assuming it would have to be the HOA that would have to.
Yeah, so that was exactly. So that's that minute. So I've seen a few buildings like this, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can actually help with a lot of the management of this, but it does make the monetary question a little bit harder because then you kind of need everyone to be, not everyone, but you need the majority of the board to, obviously be willing to do that. Right. But hopefully, telling them that they can defray these costs will help. And obviously more and more people are driving EVs. So that's going to start making a difference in terms of home prices as well.
Thank you.
I chime in on this too. Like, with condos, it's so interesting that everybody wants to wonder who's paying for what, but yet not everybody is using that pool, and yet everybody's paying for it. Not everybody's using the community hall, but yet everybody's paying for it. Not everybody's fill in the blank with whatever amenity that the tennis courts, but everybody is having to pay for it. So I saw Mr. Lobeck put something in here about the Condo Act requiring the units to pay for that. But I'd argue that it's just an amenity, and the clean air that everybody's getting is actually a benefit. So it is actually benefiting everybody by having EVs, unlike giving out gas to everybody. That's not going to help everybody with the health issues that we're seeing. So interesting.
Well, it's fascinating. And thank you both very, very much for coming today. And I'm certain that if people have more questions, they can certainly reach out to you. We can assist them in reaching you. And thank you again very much for bringing this. This is a brand new idea. And it's I find it fascinating. I think everyone does. So we're going to move on now. Patrick, do you want to handle reviewing and approving new associate members, or is that James?
Right. So yes, we've had a application for a new silver associate member here with Sarasota Home Watch Inc. And Cheryl Dexter is the rep. I didn't see her logged in. So anyway, I make a motion for the board to approve new silver associate member Sarasota Home Watch.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Now on to number 5, the status of the annual condo survey. This is the annual future condo survey that Bob Parola has been working very hard on. Bob, are you there?
I'm here.
You are? I see you.
And everyone, I hope, has received a copy of the survey.
Bob, do you want me to put it up on the screen? If you want, I can put it on the screen. Yep.
That'd be great. Yeah, please.
And what we try to accomplish with this, you can see it's 2 pages. and we try to make it so that it's reasonably easy for someone to fill out, that they're not going to see a 4 or 5 page form to fill out that would take perhaps a couple of hours for them to do. And then our thought is like electric vehicles, which is a good subject, that would require a separate survey that could possibly be at least one sheet by itself. So the questions we have on the for electric vehicles, for example, there are just 3 or 4 of them, just to get an idea. And then you would take the results of the survey and then perhaps put together a second survey regarding electric vehicles. And you can apply that to virtually any subject that is a hot button issue at the time. You know, we know the state legislature is meeting now, and who knows what they're going to cook up for us, condo associations, in the next 60 days. But, you know, there too, we think this is probably a good baseline start, and then we can just add to it as we go along.
Does anybody have any questions? Alan, please. Alan, you muted. Could you unmute? Thank you.
Bob, I have a few questions. I don't know if you want them now or if you want them separately. Mostly minor things, but
I think it's good that we will discuss it so that, you know, because Ted Wilson is here on the call, and, you know, we'll be meeting again with Sheila, and it'll be good to incorporate everyone's thoughts in it. Okay. I just try to give you, you know, our basic idea that to try to keep it as minimal as possible, with the idea that other subjects can be approached in the future in a more thorough manner. But go ahead, Al.
Okay, my thoughts, I don't think we'll add anything to the length because I agree with you entirely on that. But if you could just scroll to the beginning, I'd appreciate it on the screen. Under budget financial, you list 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and 3 bedroom. In our building, and probably in all the buildings, it's predicated less on the number of bedrooms than it is on the square footage.
Yeah.
So I'd be inclined, in the interest of space probably, to eliminate the number of bedrooms per unit and just add the word current annual maintenance fees. So it'd be collective for the whole building.
Yes, you know, actually, I absolutely agree with you on that. But there is at least one association I know of that they pay their maintenance fees based on the size of the unit or the number of bedrooms. But at the end of the day, you know, the price per square foot for maintenance, I think, is the most realistic number, because that's what most people are paying their association fees on.
Exactly. So that would solve it nicely.
Yes.
Also on that page, down at the bottom, under do you utilize any of the following security measures? Monitoring and cameras are listed as separate things. I would imagine them to be one thing. You know, monitoring by cameras. Or,
yes.
I'm not sure the language.
Hey, Bob.
Go ahead, Ted.
The thought process there is that you may have a monitoring system where somebody's watching cameras on it or watching the screen on it. And do you have a video backup system to record what you're looking at?
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, in our building, we have so many cameras, no one could possibly monitor them. But we also have the backup. So if a bicycle was stolen out of the garage, you can go back and look at the tape. So maybe this should be a little nuanced in that question.
Maybe are you suggesting maybe instead of cameras, say video system or video backup?
That might do it. Video backup.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I don't want to dominate this thing, but as long as I'm on a roll and everybody seems to be agreeing. Under construction,
Second
The very
page.
first item, are there noise restrictions for time of year, days when work is allowed? I would bifurcate those and say, are there noise restrictions for the time of year you can work? And are there time restrictions for the days and hours that you can work? Some buildings allow only summer work, and some say, no, you can do it year round, but you got to do it between 9 and 4, and some say you can only do it Monday through Friday. So I would just bifurcate that question.
Okay.
Under
Rental.
rental,
Colleen will review that.
yep, under rentals, it says, is there a waiting period? And I'm not sure what that means. I guess what that's going at is there, can you do it for 12 consecutive months, or do you have to wait 3 months between waiting periods? I think that language might just need a little clarifying.
Yeah, and actually the thought there is that some buildings now are restricting new buyers that they can't rent their unit for a year or 2 years after they purchase it.
Yeah.
We can make that a little clearer.
Okay, and the final one is package handling, delivery handled by staff. I'm just not clear. We have a security guard at the desk 24/7. He receives packages. He doesn't deliver anything. I'm just not quite sure I understand what this question is asking.
Question is, you may have a staff member who does do it. Oops, I'm done.
And my final thought.
Sorry, Ellen, go ahead.
No, my final thought is just adding one question, perhaps, and maybe no one else is interested in this, but the question would be, do you have an owner emergency response team? Yes or no? We happen to. So in a hurricane, there are owners who actually have responsibilities for like the doors and some other things. But if there's no interest in that particularly, then forget it. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Bob, I have a question about the rentals.
Yes.
I think there, unless I'm missing it as being a part of these, the number of times you can rent per year. For instance, I know we have a limit. You can't rent every week. You can only rent, I believe, twice a year, even if you rent it for a month.
Right.
But you know, how many times a year can you do that? Are there any other questions? I'm sorry.
No, we'll absolutely look at that.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Patrick?
Yeah, just Bob, on that same one on the rentals, where you had the question of minimum leasing time, instead of, I mean, I would add maybe 1 year as a common two.
Yes.
And then I guess you're saying other, you don't want to know, you don't want them to write in what the other is, do you? Or do you want to capture that?
I'm sorry, there was some noise.
You were getting a big echo.
So it was.
Okay.
Here, add 1 month, and if you're saying other, do you want the number of months?
Well, there's usually the minimum leasing time, like at Broadway, it's 3 months and 1 time a year. But I could see adding some clarifications to it.
Okay. Are we able to identify what this problem is?
I think it's hard.
It could be 2 people on a Zoom call in the same room.
Okay, could we
The
have
problem was
everybody?
with Guy DeCecco's phone before.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it seems to be fixed.
There we go. He's muted it.
It's like magic. Okay. Yes, Ted.
One thing that Bob and I have talked about, if we can have some, I don't know if you want to have a separate board meeting, so to speak, if we can get this thing approved sometime early in this month of March, We'd like to get it out to the building managers and see if we can have some kind of an early response back for the annual meeting in April. I don't know if that's going to be possible or not, but I think it may be something that would be worthwhile attracting people to the annual meeting if we had something like this available.
I think that would be really sort of magical thinking to get all of these back, you know, in a week or two. We're hoping to get them back after going back and back and back and asking them to fill them out. Bob, what's your comment on that?
I believe, you know, Ted and I and Colleen should get together again. And I received an email from David Lau. We'll go through all the comments people have made and try to incorporate as many of them as we can. As I said, this is, you know, it's a draft. And in fact, Ted had 2 or 3 suggestions that aren't incorporated in this particular document. But so we'll be looking forward to hearing, if we can hear from everyone in the next 2 or 3, 4 days. And then perhaps by the end of next week, Ted and I and Colleen can meet again and try to get this thing close to as a finished product as we possibly can.
Well, excellent. Ted, that would have been great, but I think I can't imagine we can do that. But
I understand. But the thing that we need to think about, though, all of us, is that we need to put a certain amount of emphasis on it to our managers in the building, because that's who we anticipate will be filling it out probably. Is managers to take it and not sit on it. That's what I really was more interested in than anything else.
Absolutely. And thank you all for working on that.
I agree.
I'm sorry, Alan.
I agree. It's going to be a little bit of pulling teeth to get all the managers to respond quickly.
Maybe even more than that.
But I'm perfectly comfortable with Ted and Bob, given the input from today and given if anybody has additional comments in the next day or two, for them just going ahead with it. I don't think it has to come back to us for more revisions. I think, you know, they know exactly. I mean, they did a great first draft, and I know they'll incorporate it. So I think they can go ahead. The sooner the better.
Anybody want to speak to that?
I'm willing to work with Bob on when they get the final version. I think we've gotten feedback. I think if there's no objections, then we'll proceed. And then I'll work with Bob, make sure we do the mechanics of how we go out and keep track of who's responded and who hasn't. We can set that mechanism up in our membership system here.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you all for all the work you've put into this. I'm going to call for John Moran now for city.
Wait a minute. No.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I jumped right over Roger and Patrick. Sorry. The organization will collapse if I keep doing this. Nominations for the board of directors for the Downtown Sarasota Condo Association. Roger, would you lead us through that?
Let's have Patrick do it. He has done it before.
All right. Yeah, Roger and I were tasked to work on the nominations committee, and so we did send out, you know, the notice of the meeting and call for nominations. And so what we've done is put together the slate of directors. So what we're showing here is based on what we've heard from our directors, that they're all continuing. If there's any of our current directors who are not planning to continue, let me know. Otherwise, we will include you here in the slate. And then we had one new nomination from Catherine Sellers, and here is her background. She is at Mark Sarasota. Oops, sorry, just trying to get where people can read that if they care. Anyway. And so I would ask the board to approve putting forward this slate of nominees, and I will send it out with the standard proxy that we've used in the past here to the designated member representatives of our member condos. And so I've been going through all of our list of condominiums to be sure that we've got them paid up. We received another payment yesterday for one. And there are 2 or 3 that had not paid, so we'll be making final checks on those if they're not. And if there's any of the condos who did not reply to the request for confirmation of your member rep, please send that back too, because we want to make sure that these proxies go out to the right person. Saves a lot of time down the road. So, with that, then I would make a motion for the board to support putting forward to the members the proxy with this slate of directors.
And I second it. It's Roger.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Okay.
And
Now,
thank you.
John.
Thank you, but now John. John, jump right in here. City update. John?
You're muted.
John, you have to, you're muted, John. Wait, stop talking.
There you go.
Okay.
I have a bit of an inside baseball report and then I have to leave. But the did lost 2 votes at the City Commission on March 1st. Thanks to Liz. She helped us. She tried for us, but we still lost 2 votes. One of those votes is that we lost one of the founders of the Downtown Improvement District, a member of the ad hoc committee that founded the Downtown Improvement District in 2008, Ernie Ritz. I have the sense that the current City Commission wants to replace board members with new blood, so-called new ideas, new energy. Well, we original members of the ad hoc committee, which included me back in 2008, we still have little energy left. We still have ideas, but I guess we were not convincing to the newer city commissioners. So we lost Ernie Ritz, who was just elected chair. And he was essentially kicked off the board right after he was elected by the current commission. We're responding. We may be attempting to rename Lemon Avenue Plaza the Ritz Plaza and put a plaque on his building, which is adjacent to the Lemon Avenue Plaza, in honor of his service and his works for downtown Sarasota. So that's that concludes my update, and I just want to thank Liz because she voted for the motion to keep Ernie on the board, and she also voted for the other motion, which we lost, which was to limit board members, limit directors who are also active merchants to a quantity of 2. Hello? Identical to the ordinance of the St. Armand's Business Improvement District. So thanks to Liz, and that concludes my report.
Thank you, John. New blood is great as long as it has a little bit of old knowledge and perhaps competency. That would be helpful. Are there any questions for John? Thank you then, John, if you have to run.
Well, one question, maybe Roger could fill us in. The other vote that was taken on Monday had to do with the Sarasota Orchestra.
Yeah, that was my next bullet point. Roger, would you fill us in on what happened there?
Yes, I'll be happy to. This concerns the Sarasota Orchestra and what's happening with the organization. I'm going to start with some background. I'm going to update you on what is currently happening and the results of that, and some action that was taken Monday night by the City Commission, and what it means to us who live in condominiums downtown and who are residents of the city. And so if you'll bear with me, I'll start with a little history, of what's happening. The Sarasota Orchestra is planning to build an 1,800-seat performance hall and a 700-seat music center. The music center is to serve as rehearsal space for the orchestra, but also to serve our local community music organizations for customized rehearsal and performance space. They've consulted with them, and the needs of our local music organizations they were pretty excited about that. During the time we were watching the evolution of the Bay, the orchestra announced that it did not wish to remain on the Bay and would look elsewhere. And it proposed to use 7 acres in Payne Park to build the performance hall and the music center. It also proposed to use the nearby county's judicial parking garage, an estimated $30 million savings on parking, and move tennis courts on the park to another area in the park. The proposal generated tennis club and neighbor opposition. The park has had a long and challenging history coming into existence and includes a sizable city investment. And the opposition convinced the city commission that placing the orchestra facility inside the park was unacceptable. And the commission agreed to that 4-1, and this is almost 2 years ago. The orchestra then announced that it would search outside the city of Sarasota for a new location in the county. And subsequently with the pandemic, everything has been delayed. However, recently, last month, at a public presentation by the orchestra CEO, he said that the orchestra was seeking a location in Sarasota County and hoped to announce the decision to relocate the orchestra in the middle of 2021 into the county. Now, a couple of comments then on the results of that. The loss of the orchestra to the city of Sarasota will be a significant cultural and economic blow to the city and to its reputation as an arts and cultural center. Sarasota and Longboat residents will have a significantly longer drive for classical music performances and musical events. The economic activity to be created by the orchestra with a new performance hall, it holds 125 concerts a year. It has 88,000 people who attend its concerts. This is a huge economic impact. In addition, the new music center will serve as home for our local music organizations and will attract patrons and customers to their performances, such as the Parola Music Program, Key Chorale, Choral Artist of Sarasota, chamber music, jazz, and music festivals. Well, Monday evening, the City Commission passed a motion 4-1 asking the orchestra to reconsider its decision to locate in the city of Sarasota. I might add, the orchestra was born here and has spent the last 70 years in Sarasota. And so the question arises, what does this mean to people who own and live in downtown Sarasota condominiums? Well, it means that an economic opportunity for downtown Sarasota to host the orchestra will not happen. It means that if you like jazz, chamber music, music festivals, or the Key Chorale, Choral Artists of Sarasota, the Parola Music Program, you'll have to drive to Lakewood Ranch area. If you want to hear the Sarasota Orchestra or visiting national or international orchestras who are going to be attracted to this new facility, you're going to have to drive to the Lakewood Ranch area. If your children or grandchildren are interested in the summer music camp or the youth orchestra, you're going to be driving again. If in addition you wish to have dinner before a concert, University Town Center has restaurants at your service. Just be careful when you're driving back home at night. If the orchestra departs, we will regret the loss of our key musical institutions. For Sarasota residents, this will be the day the music died. I have contact information if you have an interest in this to express your views, and Patrick will put it up for us. We have the address. email address of the commissioners in one email and the CEO of the orchestra. And I'm open for questions and discussion.
All right, from the board first, Ken?
Roger, what did the city commission direct the staff to do?
To communicate with the orchestra to see if there are other possibilities associated perhaps with the park, not in the park, that was pretty clear, or other places.
Anyone else on the board of directors?
Yeah, Roger, I believe the motion directed Marlon to re-engage with the orchestra. And what was mentioned was on the fringe of the park, or words to that effect, or in the park. And that's where one commissioner, the one vote went no, because Commissioner Jen would not sign on to even looking at something encroaching into the park. So I believe Marlon does have the mandate to look at both. I think those of us, including myself, who are kind of got into this, very much a favor as a key objective is staying out of the park. So with that is, and I wanted to make that clear. There were probably 20 speakers on Zoom or in the chambers who seemed to be under the impression that, you know, the default was to raid the park, so to speak, and the intent, at least as I'm aware, in my endorsement, if that's the right thing, is do everything absolutely possible to keep the building outside of the existing park. I will, thanks for Patrick for suggesting this, but I did have a drone analysis done, and currently about a third of the park is not green space. It's roads, it's buildings, it's whatever. So, you know, I think some people have the image that the park is all green. Well, there's hardscape and you know, skateboard parks and stuff like that. So there's already elements in the park that are not, you know, bushes. And so I think it's just a perspective on things that, you know, could there be a discussion of a no net loss of green space, of maybe tearing down some buildings and whatever. And if you needed a sliver of the park for the orchestra, is that the greater good? But to be continued. I was encouraged in a discouraging way that there was a dialogue about that. It's back on the table. Hopefully we can reboot on the discussion. Marlon now has the mandate to begin to look at that. And I think we all want to help him.
So what you're talking about then, David and Roger, is the absolutely crazy and very infrequently used idea of compromise. What is there any discussion about, pardon me, perhaps trying to reach a compromise about the size of the theater that the orchestra had originally requested?
Well, Roger, if I can jump in here, it is Michael Halflance has taken a look at this, thankfully, because he was kind of the on the white horse here a little bit, you know, to live for another day. His opinion that the 7-acre original ask, which had a lot of surface parking, is just way bigger than you need. And he looked at comparable orchestra space venues well-known around the world and feels that a footprint of, say, a third of the 7 acres could be very adequate to accommodate a world-class 18, you know, the needs they have. But he feels, in his opinion, and this is initial, this has to be vetted. And of course, unfortunately, the orchestra's architect wasn't involved, nor was Mr. McKenna. So this is kind of dicey the way this kind of came down, but there was clearly no intent to offend anybody. It was just to embroider on the mayor's getting it on the agenda? How could the residents input to this and try and be helpful with information?
Wonderful. Roger, did you want to add to that? Roger?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'd like to, well, I've had the opportunity to sit in a meeting with the orchestra CEO, and they're pretty committed and adamant that they're on the right track. And that makes it difficult to deal with. And so we're at this point kind of doing a Hail Mary about, can we save this? I would suggest that most of the people who attend the orchestra have not paid any attention to this until perhaps very recently. And the fact that an announcement is going to come this summer is going to be a surprise to many people. And I guess one of the issues is how important is this to the citizens of Sarasota that we try to make a difference. We're pushing hard here, but it's not particularly welcome.
Well, you're to be commended, both of you and others who've been involved. Patrick.
Yeah, I would just like to add that one of the reasons I think Dsca is taking a role in this is keep in mind that our boundaries for our neighborhood extends, at least south of Fruitville, extends all the way to Lime. So it was brought out in the city commission meeting that the future development east of Washington is important for the city, and it's important for us because that's residents. There are already townhouses going in just on the east side of the School Avenue there by Payne Park. There's also developments targeted further up Ringling and further up Main, all the way to Lime. And so those are future downtown condo or downtown townhouse residents already who want to be able to, not only walk to parks, but a key other aspect, and we touched on this in our green space, we want to keep green space, but we also want to activate parks, and there's another, we'll talk about in a minute with our committees, but having pedestrian generators, as to the extent that it doesn't overwhelm the passive enjoyment, can be a very positive. So that's one reason why we're kind of actively involved in the dialogue here.
Well, I think when you talk about activating parks, you don't usually, build the buildings in the park. They're typically around the periphery so that the pedestrians can then enjoy the park.
Right.
So it seems as though the discussion, I think, is David putting up a drawing here?
This is work in progress, but this is a Dsca map. You probably can't make it out very well, but I'm doing a heat map of all the new developments, the under construction or recently done, showing that in our boundaries, we have 400 units approximately under construction right now, and another 1,300 to come. So we're going to have downtown, like it or not, in our neighborhood, within about a 1.2 mile walk of Payne Park, we're going to have 3,000 new residents and about 15,000, well, probably if you go east, we probably got 20,000 people within a mile and a quarter of Payne Park. So again, I hear what you say, Eileen, about the preciousness of parkland, but let's try and find a way on the fringe and preserve the essence of the park.
Seemed like a great idea to me. Roger, did you want to add anything? Does anybody have any questions from the board? Any questions from anyone else in the peanut gallery on page 1 or page 2? All right, thank you. Thank you, all of you who have been working on this and who stayed at the City Commission really late the other night in order to do it. Greatly appreciate it. We'll go now to Jamie. who is head of the Associate and Events Committee. Jamie.
Yeah, just two events I wanted to share. The first is the March 24th webinar on insurance rate hikes, creative financial solutions. That's going to be from 4 to 5:30. So if you guys haven't registered, so make sure you please do so. And then I just actually received this one today. This is from the Sarasota Garden Club. They're presenting Sarasota Music Conservatory, Symphony in the Gardens. And that's going to be Sunday, March 21st at 2:30 in the afternoon at 1131 Boulevard of the Arts. And that's going to be outside on the west lawn. It's $25. You can go to their website, sarasotagardenclub.org. You are going to have to wear a mask, social distance, and bring your own snacks, and water will be provided. So,
thank you. Anything further?
Nope, that ends my report.
Thank you. Patrick and the Green Space Committee.
The Green Space Committee has not met in the last month. However, following up on Homeless Committee, which Peter will talk about in a minute, there is a topic we're looking at is how to activate some of the downtown parks by having a kiosk that could be rolled in or carted in or hauled in or drove in to various parks and moved around. So this will be an upcoming dialogue and discussion as to how we might do that. I'll defer to Peter where he's got some ideas about how we're going to engage with both the homeless side and the park side of the city management. So,
thank you, Peter.
And we had the Dsca Homeless Committee had its meeting on the last Thursday of the month last week, which was February 25th. And we had a number of new members, which was nice because this new blood also came with old experience. So as Eileen would say, so it was very much appreciated. And one of those members was put on the board of directors today, Catherine Sellers, and she's been very helpful in the community activities. But we reviewed a number of items, and one of which was the video presentation by Kevin Stiff and Chris Johnson that was done at the CCNA meeting on February 6th, which we found just amazingly helpful. And we really appreciate CCNA putting that on through YouTube, because we've been able to draw from that rather than just written notes that we had. So we will make sure that Lou, I see you maybe on, Lou Costa, the chair of the CCNA, really appreciate the work you folks are doing around this area as well. We ended up coming up with a number of suggestions. The main one continues to be, though, the primary one, at communication aimed at providing information based on the reality that certain behaviors that are being exhibited by persons without homes, and we really made a distinction this time between these people and vagrants, and we'll come up with a better different definition for vagrants, are being encouraged because reality of the data doesn't match the reality of the residents and visitors' experience downtown. And of course, the data is a non-material kind of thing that measures human behavior, but it doesn't take the place of actually meeting a homeless person on Main Street, sleeping or staggering or whatever else stereotypical behavior we assign to these people. So we're going to work very hard on bringing the data and the reality experience of people closer together so that people can see that things are improving, because most people don't believe that the situation for homeless people is improving with their impact on people downtown. The second thing is that we're going to be communicating, and hopefully we can work, we'd like to work more with the committees that DSCA has. And this was a safety and health and safety committee that we might want to work with. And I know you're interested in this, Eileen, but supporting and encouraging more active and visible foot patrols by the Sarasota Police Department downtown. We have 4 officers downtown now assigned, and they cover about 20 hours a day in 10-hour shifts. And it's difficult to do 7 days a week, obviously, with 4. In my past experience, when we wanted to cover a hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we needed 9 people to fill out the 7-day week. So we would like to add a little, encourage the addition of visible foot patrol people downtown. And so we will be bringing recommendations to the DSCA as the budget process begins to move through the city, and try to get people or offices added to the foot patrol, as well as we're working right now with Kevin Stiff, and we would like to make sure that the hot teams could be expanded by adding a police officer and a social worker, because those have been very, very successful in helping to mitigate the problems with the homeless population downtown. We're also looking at creating innovative opportunities for residents and visitors to use public spaces, such as developing, and this is an idea that came from the Green Space Committee, developing a kiosk in the park program to bring a kiosk with the materials and items and whatever we need to encourage interaction, greater interaction for residents to come into the parks, because we do know that when the parks are populated by the residents, the homeless begin to feel uncomfortable, or that some of them stay. And of course, what we know in psychology about attitudes is when you have a positive experience with a person that you didn't know before, that can turn into a positive perception of that person. So we'll be looking at that, and we'll be working with Jerry Vogel, or we'll attempt to work with Jerry Vogel to move forward with the kiosk and the park program, as well as possibly an ambassador's initiative to go along with that. One item of note is that we have some new leadership at the Salvation Army. We now have a lieutenant colonel, and as I remember in my days, you stood a little straighter for a lieutenant colonel than you did for a major. But and we've replaced Major Whitten with Lieutenant Colonel Michelle Matthews, who's an area commander, and she comes from the central office in Washington, D.C. So I met her for the first time this morning, actually, on a Zoom, and we'll be making some headway into getting her involved in our programs as well. So again, that's my report, and you can go to the DSCA homeless website and the homeless page, and these materials will start to appear on that as soon as I can get Patrick to give me 2 or 3 lessons on how to attach these materials to my homeless page.
Thank you, Peter. And I hope that we'll be able to get our new police chief as a guest in the near future, so that you can ask that question along with everything else we will have questions about for the new chief. The next is the Health and Safety Committee, and I'm going to ask David if he can tell us how we're doing COVID-wise in the city.
Patrick, can I ask your help?
Yeah, just I'm working on getting that. 1 second, let me find it back here again. So sorry.
We're hoping for good
I had them all lined up.
Please bring us good news.
I would say generally trending down. I mean, in the area of 30 and 35% compared with 14 days ago, and so it's trending the right way. It's a little bit of a roller coaster at times. Like a few days ago, it was up 9% on the day before, and then it was down. But the trend is, as you will see in the charts, heading the right slope. So again, this information now I've got data on 11 full months. Started this April 3rd of last year, so we're coming up on 12 full months of information. So this is county-wide numbers over the 11-month period, beginning, as I said, in April of 2020. And you can see, and the top number is county-wide, and then the bottom line is the 4 city zips. And again, it's not pure to the city, but it's poetically, it's the 4 city zips that comprise the whole city. So you can see, the history of last summer. There was a peak, and then you see the tabletop. It started to dip in September, and then things went poorly, into November. And then since then, we can see it trending down. So that's, again, county-wise. Some people would observe that our city zips have fared slightly better than the county overall, but and the further slides, Patrick, could have the next one, please. And this is county-wise for the last 14 days, the trend line that I mentioned, showing about a 40% decrease over the last 14 days, county-wise, all zips. And I think there's 40 different zip codes, give or take. Okay, the next one, please. And then this is a little hard to read, but this is our collective 4 city zips in their trend line over the last 14 days. And then the final one is by city zip. This is by individual zip. And you can see that a couple of our zips have, trended a little bit higher than the others, but you can see in 34236 downtown is one of the lower graphs. And you can see again that, so we've had spikes and so forth, but in 34234, the top line there has plateaued for the last 5 or 6 days. It jumped up a little bit, but so this is the trends, and compared with a month or 2 ago, it seems much better.
Well, that's certainly better news than you were able to bring us in the last 11 months. It's good to see. Just for your information, there's a group called Passport Health on Ringling, and they will do COVID testing for a price. But they told me the other day when I went to get checked right before I'm getting on an airplane tomorrow, they have a new test, and it is for vaccine-produced antibodies. So they're not advertising it yet because they're waiting for more people to get the vaccine, but evidently it will check to see what your antibody level is. So since no one has been able to tell us whether these vaccines will maintain your antibodies after 6 months, 8 months, a year, it might be a good test to know about, to find out if you were going to travel or something, if you wanted to check in and see if you still had antibodies to the virus. But they haven't talked about it yet, but I thought I'd throw that out there. Roger, the Transportation Committee.
Okay, well, nothing very exciting on transportation until April, when the construction on Gulfstream roundabout will begin. But for today, we're going to turn to Alan with his subcommittee on electric vehicles. Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Just in the interest of keeping it short, let me just mention that last week I participated, or I attended a webinar sponsored by the Clean Cities of Western Washington and the Center for Sustainable Energy. And it was very illuminating. Basically, they have 3 prongs to what they're doing. One is to provide general educational information to educate multi-unit building EV charging major stakeholders, which would be people like ourselves. The second objective is to provide resources and tools for residents to advocate for charging stations. And the third is to provide resources for building owners to understand the business case for it. I'm not going to go into what was discussed. This was a rather lengthy presentation, but I did ask, and yesterday I received a copy of the presentation, a video of the presentation, along with the compilation of the slides that we used in that presentation. So what I'd like to do is forward that to you. And I guess maybe the best thing would be Patrick. If I mean, I could email it to the board, but perhaps Patrick, you have a obviously larger mailing list. And if I sent it to you, perhaps you'd want to forward it to other people who have traditionally joined this call and others who may have an interest. It really is quite interesting. And the end result of this is going to be a whole packet of information and resources for any buildings who are interested in this to learn more about it, and as a working document to walk you through the steps necessary to get EV charging stations. So the other thing I want to talk about briefly is the survey that Bob just prepared and shared with us. He's right. You know, you could make a whole 2-page thing just on this subject. I think what this survey has will be enough to give the subcommittee a good basis and foundation to proceed from there. Once we get those results in, we'll also know who responded how. And that could be the good database for going forward with getting people, interested people, together on Zoom or in person, depending on when all this happens, to see how we can further our mutual interests. Alongside that, on kind of a parallel track, and I know Patrick has information on this, but we want to explore what the city has and what it might be planning to do and what we might plan to do collaboratively with them. So that will move along a parallel track, but this survey is a good beginning, and from there we'll go forward.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan? Patrick?
I was going to say, Alan, if you want to email that information to the board, I'll take it, then I'll work to make sure we can get it up on our website, as well as we may be able to include a link in our upcoming newsletter, the news update that's scheduled to go out shortly. If we don't keep tinkering with it and adding more things. So we'll get that information out, yes.
I'll send that to you and you can disseminate to the board and
Okay,
all the venues you just mentioned. That's great.
Terrific. Thank you very much. The zoning code, considering the late hour, you'll be happy to know, zoning code committee, I should say, you'll be happy to know, has not met. We are still hoping to find someone to head that up. So if you know anyone or have any interest in joining that committee, please do. And we would like someone to actually run it. The next one is the Bay Park Conservancy. It's Bob Parola.
Yes, the Bay Park Conservancy is going before the city commissioners on March the 8th, and they will be seeking approval for among other things, the Sunset Pier. There is some concerns from particularly Condo on the Bay, but also another adjoining condo about amplified music and the operating hours of the park. I don't believe that that's going to be part of the agenda. I think here they're just looking for some approval so they can continue with the completion of phase 1. And in that regard, at Broadway Promenade, where we have 186 units, we used SurveyMonkey to do a survey of our owners of what their feelings were. And actually, we got a 78% return respondents and an overwhelming positive feedback, as you sort of expect. Over 90% are in favor of this project and want to see it going forward, including the Sunset Pier. So that information is going to be shared at the City Commission meeting on March the 8th. That's about all I have on.
Okay. Thank you. Alan, question?
Just to add to that, at the commission meeting, one of the things being discussed is the elevation of the land and also the installation of, I believe it's 90-foot poles, lighting poles. This was a matter of some concern to residents at the Alinari. for obvious reasons, being right across the street from it. And one of our residents, who's been very active in the Bay, met with the Bay representative and was reassured, and he, the Alinari person, seems thoroughly convinced that the light is going to be downward facing, that the plan makes sense, that these lights are going to be basically in the trees. And the reason for the height is because then they can get a little more spread with a lot fewer poles. But I think the question of light pollution has been well addressed by the Bay Conservancy, and hopefully it'll be exactly as they promised.
Okay. Any questions? All right. The Rosemary District report. David Lowe, are you have something for us?
I am here, Eileen, and ready for two pieces of great news. Yesterday, had a meeting with Alan Palagar, who's now on the Rosemary board, and many of you would know him as his at-large experience at the Bay. But Anand and I met with Jerry Fogel, Candy Peterson, and David Boswell, the procurement director of the city, and had a terrific discussion about the selection of the design team that will design the park, and how actively the Rosemary District Association has been invited to the table to actively participate and, dare I say, help interview and help strongly recommend the selection. So we'll be talking about this at the RDA board meeting next week, but it was a fantastic call of openness and cooperation. The plan still is to try and do the demo this fall, maybe throw down some interim sod or benches or something, and then find the money in the coming year. The other thing we've done, I don't know if any of you walk by the park site, but FB&L has reactivated an old light for that area, one of those highlights that kind of shines down. So without being obtrusive, we've kind of illuminated the area that was a little on the dark side to help show that, you know, one of our commitments with the park design is going to be sensitive to the unsheltered and those kinds of things. The other bit of great news is they started today on the Florida Avenue streetscape project. There's going to be 10 trees on the west side, irrigated. And I found out yesterday that in addition to that, they're going to replace the sidewalk on the east side of the street that was pretty badly broken, but had not been revealed to me that they were going to do that as part of this project. So in the next 10 days, we should have 10 trees. So they're working away, and we really appreciate Jerry Fogel and Candy's work on this, and the commissioners that were behind some of the approval on this. So good news.
Thank you, David. You are just full of good news today. I have to tell you. You get the prize. Okay, now.
Eileen?
Yes,
we skipped CCNA on the agenda list.
I have a habit of doing that. I'm so sorry. Ted Wilson. Ted, I see you.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I was not quite ready.
I must have known that when I skipped it.
I'm trying to clean up my screen a little bit. Video, there I am. Sorry. Patrick and I have been talking about this, and the crux of the matter comes down to is evidently the board of the CCNA is interested in, not interested especially in having a downtown or an advocate for the neighborhoods. Evidently the city has shown little interest. Is that right, Patrick, in having a ombudsman, so to speak, for the downtown? And we would like to know how basically the board feels about that subject, and whether you want me to advocate and proceed with the idea of having a neighborhood ombudsman who would have sign-off privileges within building approvals or planning process in the city administration. Is that Patrick?
Before you go there, Ted, let me just add a little bit to that. I'm on the executive committee of CCNA as of the last couple of months, and I'm on the committee that was just formed that is going to study the issue of where someone could fit into the approval process in the city. So you're a little ahead of what CCNA is talking about. It's actually going to study the approval process, and once it's fully understood, come up with a suggestion for how best to possibly have some neighborhood participation in the approval process for projects.
Okay.
So it's in early stages. And since I will be moving over to CCNA, when I move from condo living to home living, I am really hoping that we will all be holding each other's hand between CCNA and Dsca, and that we can all work on these things together.
So,
Patrick.
Eileen, were you referring to the committee that was formed as a result of the resolution that was brought before the board here that we endorsed? If you want, maybe tie that together, give us an update on, because the Dsca did endorse that resolution to
Yes.
CCNA, right? Okay.
Correct. That was actually approved. It was approved
So-
that a committee would be formed. It was
And
not.
this is the Ron Collins?
That's correct.
Oh,
It was
could you
not an
elaborate on that?
Well, that's what I was just talking about. There is a
Okay.
committee, there will be a committee, Ron is forming it to study first, to understand the approval process as it exists, and then from there to understand where there could possibly be improvement in the approval process from neighborhood perspectives, which, you know, originally the idea was to have a neighborhood person that was injected into the approval process in some way, but that has to be practical and you have to understand how it works before you can fix it. So that's what the committee is going to begin with, and it hasn't even gotten up and running yet, but it has been approved. And that did come from here. That came from Patrick, actually, when he was the representative to CCNA. It just took a while to get around to being voted on. But I'm hoping, you know, once it gets going, we will, you know, we'll work with Dsca on that, and we'll all hopefully come up with some very good ideas for improvements to that process.
I just want to add, in the past, it was the Dsca's zoning code committee that worked with Ron Collins and others on issues such as that. And so this is why it's important that we have someone step forward here among our many participants to help serve on a committee, leadership, knowing that you got a lot of other senior people backing you up. But that's the committee that would then engage with this committee from CCNA on land development. So we want to make sure that we get our committee going here. So volunteers, please.
Yes, please, because we know where you live, and if you don't volunteer, we will come and find you.
Do you feel, if I can interject, do you have anything that you want me to take to the meeting on this Saturday from Dsca?
Patrick, I'll let you answer that.
I would just say at this point, we will follow up with the new committee and participate as appropriate as that new CCNA committee is formed. We appreciate it moving forward, and yet these other issues can be addressed through that, as to DRC sign off, et cetera, can be done as part of that new committee. I just want to say that that was still an open item that we want to make sure that we have that representation, and we'll look through that. Thank you.
I'll bring it up.
Thank you, Patrick, for reminding me about the fact that this did come from Patrick and from the zoning committee. So very prescient as usual. I think at this point, and thank you, Ted, I think at this point, we are done with the business part of the meeting, but we do have associate members who help Dsca do the work that they do, and Dsca does do a substantial amount of work. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to talk about the people who actually support this organization.
Thank you, Eileen. Yes, like Eileen said, they do provide a lot of support to Dsca. So we just want to, again, thank them for everything they do. I think what I'm going to do is just read off the names of the members. And if you're here, please speak up. If not, because Kristen usually has a better idea of who's here and who's not. So Angus and Terry. Okay. How about Socia Gulf Coast? Atlas Insurance. Aqua Plumbing. Brown and Brown. Castle Group. And I know Taylor, Kristen's daughter, is here to discuss CBiz and also core marketing on Kristen's behalf. At least I believe she is. Are you there, Taylor?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor from Core Marketing Solutions. We represent a portfolio of clients. So we have Norton Hammersley, who are attorneys, and Roofside West, which is a green algae treatment. But 4 of our clients are platinum members of the Dsca. So we have CBiz, who provide market analysis and association insurance services for condos and HOAs. We have Professional Plumbing, who provide pipelining and 24-hour plumbing services. We also have Right Way Emergency Services, who can take care of all disaster needs like fire, water, mold, disaster planning even. And lastly, we have Forge Engineering, who can handle your structural building envelope issues and will respond to you within 24 to 48 hours. They're great guys and they're always on their phones. So if you're in need of any of these services, please keep these amazing people in mind. And that's it from me. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening.
Thank you, Taylor. Do we have CIT Banking by any chance? Okay, our First Service Residential. Gulf Shore Insurance. Culver's Palm and Tree Pest Management. Do you have Lighthouse Property? McGriff Insurance Services. Do you have D for Nature Zone by any chance? No. Okay, Stabler Appraising and Consulting. And I thought Tannenbaugh Scrow was here. I don't know if they left. Are you guys, Michelle, maybe still here or no? No. Okay, that's it for the platinum members. And then do we have any of our gold associate members here? We have Ask an Adjuster. Cadence Bank.
Cadence Bank is here.
Okay. Hello, welcome.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Nice to see everyone today. I know Reva was tied up today, so I'm here to represent Cadence Bank and here to provide any of you with any kind of services that you need in the way of banking, investments, and loans. So we're glad to be a part of this association and everything that it does and anything it's going to do in the future to better downtown Sarasota.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Donna.
You're welcome.
And the last one is Quick Response Fire Protection. Are they here? If not, that concludes the associate and the platinum and gold associate highlights.
Thank you. At this point, before we end for the evening, are there any comments from the representatives of the different condo buildings who are online? Any issues they'd like to bring up or discuss? I knew it was dinner time. Everyone has everyone's done. I want to thank everybody for staying with us through this meeting, which I think was full of really, really good information. And we look forward to seeing everyone on April 7th again at 4 o'clock. And this will be the annual meeting, so a very important meeting for everyone to attend. Having said that, I'll say this meeting is adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thank you, Eileen.